There's a revolution coming. Everybody knows. You can hardly pick up a newspaper or magazine these days without reading some sort of article about the interactive, multimedia, CD-ROM, virtual reality, information, superhighway stuff. It's everywhere. And you know, there are three common themes that pervade all such discussions of this coming revolution. The first is that it's going to be about interactivity somehow. Well, we don't seem to know much how, but it's going to be interactive. The second common thread is that it's going to be big. There are going to be millions of people messing around with this interactivity, and there's going to be billions and billions of dollars involved. Oh yeah, this is going to be good. But then there's a third theme to this revolution. It's sort of this, wow, it's going to be a revolution. Oh, it's going to be so wonderful. And that scares me a lot because, revolutions aren't fun. If you look at the history of revolutions, they're mostly about pain. Revolutions aren't people dancing in the street waving flags. No, they're running down the street shooting guns. That's what most revolutions are about. They're painful because, all organisms resist change. And when you have big change, dramatic change, they resist it all the more, and the greater the resistance, the more the pain. And so revolutions are intrinsically painful. And that means that if there's a revolution coming, you better watch out. You got some things to worry about here. So I'd like to talk about change in human society. I'd like to talk about revolutions. I'd like to talk about the nature of change in history. Now, a lot of people do have this naive view of revolutions, the march of history, humanity marching forward into the future. And that's not at all the way history works. History is much more like the pitter-patter of thousands of tiny baby steps as we slowly creep our way into the future. We wouldn't want to take big steps now. No, we might fall on our faces. So we take tiny baby steps. And this constitutes about 99% of all historical change. This is the way history really works. The only problem is, every now and then, the forces for change start to, for some very special set of circumstances, will suddenly rise to very dramatic levels. And when that happens, all too often, the institutions of society create a resistance to that change. And then the pressure for change does battle with the resistance to change, and the pressure builds up, and the resistance builds up, and the pressure builds up even more until finally it blasts its way past the resistance to change. And when that happens, society goes flying into the future. Only we don't go flying like this. Ha ha! No. We go flying more like this. It's crazy, it's chaotic, it's confused. Nobody knows what's happening. And this process is what we call a revolution. Now, the problem is, how are you going to cope with this? What are you going to do? Well, there are a variety of strategies, and there are also some problems. The first and simplest rule is you can't use that baby step logic during a revolution. Because during a revolution, you're not baby stepping anymore. You're kind of lurching and flying. So you can't extrapolate your way through a revolution. And this creates a major problem for lots and lots of people. Because you see, that baby step stuff, if 99% of all human history is the baby step logic, well, that means that 100% of any individual's experience is with baby step logic. That is, we go through our lives doing our baby step dance, and all we do is we take what worked for us yesterday, and we make a little tiny twist on it, and we apply it today. And that's one baby step. And then we take what worked yesterday and apply it again today, and we just keep baby stepping our way through our lives. And that works! 99% of the time, that works beautifully, that works wonderfully. And so that style of thinking is bred into our bones. If you don't think that way, you get crunched up by life really quickly. So baby step logic is really good, and a lot of people use it. And in fact, the finest and best people in society, the people who lead us, are the ones who use that baby step logic best. The trick, though, is that, well, during the Revolution, you're not supposed to do that, and that creates a problem for them. Because, you see, we have our bags of expertise. These are all the tricks that we build up as we baby step our way through life. We take all of this nice experience and we put it in our little bag. And the bag gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what separates the old pros from the young hotheads. The old pros have nice big bags of experience. And that makes them powerful. In fact, that's what makes them worthy, important people. The only thing that separates the patriarch with the silver hair and millions of dollars and lots of power from the young hothead who's, angry sitting in eating macaroni and cheese in his apartment, the only thing that separates them is that the old pro, the patriarch, has a big bag of experience, which means that big bag of experience is the only thing that makes him an important person. Which means, of course, that during a revolution, he doesn't want to let go of it. No, he clings to it. This is what makes him important. And so one of the fundamental rules of all revolutions is revolutions are never led by the old pros. The old pros are the ones who go straight to the guillotine during a revolution. So what is society to do? If we can't rely on the old pros to lead us, who do we turn to? Well, at this point, all the young hotheads leap forward and say, Yahoo! It's the revolution! Anything goes! And that's a lot of crap. Because out of 1,000 young hotheads, 900, they're all going to come up with 1,000 harebrained, idiotic, screwball schemes for the revolution. Every one of these hotheads has his own crazy idea. And out of those 1,000 young hotheads, 999 of those ideas will be flat, dead wrong. And so 999 of the young hotheads go straight to the guillotine. However, one of those hotheads, by sheer dumb luck, just manages to bumble on to the correct answer. And you know what we do with him? We make him the hero of the revolution. We give him money and power. We put him up on a pedestal. We say, he's the man with the vision who saw the future. When he was just lucky. But the thing is, what else can society do? We need somebody to help us through, so we pick whatever works. It's a very pragmatic scheme, but it's also a very silly one. And it leaves you with a big problem. How are you going to navigate your way through this revolution? You don't want to use the old pro system. After all, that bag of expertise, that's not going to help when things are flying around wildly. Now, you don't want to throw this away. A lot of the stuff in this bag is going to be really useful after the revolution. But during the revolution, you don't know which stuff is good and which stuff is false. So you have to be able, during a revolution, to set aside your bag of expertise. To put it aside, don't throw it away. You can come back to it after the revolution. But that's the first piece of advice. You can't extrapolate your way through a revolution. You've got to set aside a lot of the of the old tried and true formulae that you've been using for so many years. But you also don't want to do the young hothead approach, because the fact is the laws of logic and nature are not suspended during a revolution. The problem is not that it's magic. The problem is with the arms and legs flying around every which way and all the stuff happening during a revolution, you can't calculate all of these motions. It's just too crazy. So, what are you going to do? It appears that there is no way to responsibly navigate your way through a revolution. Well, there is a solution. The trick is, skip that phase. Ignore it. You're never going to be able to figure out what's going on, so don't even try. The solution is to think about what happens after the revolution ends, when society comes crashing down to a landing, and then what's society going to do? It's going to resume the baby step dance again, right? And when that happens, things are going to become more reasonable, more calculable, more predictable. Now, if you can figure out how things will look after the revolution ends, then all you need to do to navigate your way through is to focus your eyes on that objective and then march straight towards it. And of course, the winds and storms of the revolution are going to blow you each way they can, but if you keep marching towards that objective, you'll get there. You'll emerge from the revolution with your head still on your shoulders, and you'll probably come out pretty good. You may not be the emperor of the revolution, but at least you'll be in good shape. So, that's the strategy we want to pursue. How we do that? How are we going to figure out what things are going to look like after the revolution ends? At this point, we have to fall back on sloppier logic. We had to rely, well, the way we always do things like this, we rely on history. We look to analogies, similar situations. What other cultures or institutions or groups of people have gone through a similar revolution, or at least are now stable? What other things can we look at from history that in some way are similar to us? Now, this is dangerous ground, because you can draw a million analogies to any given situation, and out of those million, every single one will be in some way misleading. So you have to be very careful about getting the closest and best possible analogy. Now, the first step in drawing a good analogy to your situation is to have a clear idea of what your situation is. If you want to draw a comparison with yourself, you better know who you are. And so, if we want to know who we are, the fundamental question of identity for any commercial industry is the simple question, what do we sell? And at this point, an awful lot of people in our industry make a terrible blunder. They say, we sell fun. That's an awful mistake. It's perfectly understandable. If you're engaging in baby step logic and you look backwards at where we've been, everything we've done to date has been fun. So this is entirely reasonable baby step logic. But remember, you can't baby step your way through a revolution. So, what do you do here? Well, we need to somehow identify what we really sell. And fun, maybe here's the way to do it. If we step back to one of the fundamental principles we all seem to agree on, and that's that this revolution is going to be big. Okay? That tells us something very important, because it means that right now we're little, but after the revolution we'll be big. So the question is, if right now we're little and we sell fun, when we're big, what will we sell? What's the big version of fun? What's the superset? And the answer is entertainment. That's the big thing that appeals to zillions and zillions of people. Fun is a niche market. Fun appeals to a subset of society. So, and this is an enormously important distinction. And a lot of people in our industry just don't understand the difference between fun and entertainment. If you intend to survive this revolution, you damn well better get a good grip on the difference between fun and entertainment. Fun has served us very well in the past. It will sink you during the revolution. Be careful. Okay, so what we're looking for, the analogy and oh, by the way, one other thing. This realization about fun versus entertainment tells us a lot about what the revolution is going to feel like, how we're going to change, but it doesn't tell us the prime movers. It's a symptom. We know that during the revolution we're going to make this transition from fun to entertainment, but that doesn't get down to the real essence of the revolution. So we still need to push our analogy. We still need to find a good analogy. So what we're looking for is an entertainment medium. An entertainment medium that's mass market, that's stable and secure, something we can draw good conclusions from. And at this point, there are a lot of good candidates. Books, movies, music, sports. But the one I like is primetime television. Not because it's biggest or most lucrative, but because of all these other mass market entertainment forms, primetime television seems to be the least specialized. After all, sports seems to appeal very heavily to males. Movies have a special concentration in their audience of teenagers. Books are only appreciated by that subset of society that can read. So it's, primetime television, though, is much more broad in its appeal. It still has its own special clusterings of our population, but it seems to me to be less narrow or less specialized than some of the other media. So the question then becomes, what is it about primetime television that we lack? What's the magic ingredient? What do they have that we don't have? And at this point, an awful lot of people in our industry make a terrible, terrible blunder. They answer by saying, primetime television has full motion video. This is a terrible blunder because it completely ignores the history of our industry. Because if you think about it, full motion video is not something that we lack. We already have it. As a matter of fact, we've had full motion video for 18 years now. What? What? That's the most ridiculous lie you've ever heard me say. But wait a minute, let's go back to the year 1976, shall we? With the commercial introduction of the first consumer version of Pong. And I'd like to remind you that in that game there were a couple of paddles, and there was this ball, a little square thing, that bounced anywhere on the full screen at an animation rate of a full 30 frames per second. And that means it's full motion video! Oh, come on, Chris. I mean, well, yeah, in a very technical sense, you could argue that that's full motion video, but come on, it was black and white. It was one little square chunk bouncing around. That's terrible. It looked like crap. And you're right. It is crap. But let us differentiate between the existence of full motion video and the quality of that video. We have had the existence of full motion video for 18 years. And what we've been doing since 1976 is taking the quality of that video and slowly, steadily improving it with our little baby step technique. Every year we've made the quality of our video better and better and better until nowadays we've got really high quality full motion video. I mean, we're shooting actors with cameras in front of blue screens, for Christ's sake. We're really getting up there now. Which raises a problem. If full motion video is the answer, and we're getting pretty far up there, then the revolution should be pretty well finished by now, shouldn't it? I mean, we would have expected that if full motion video is what's going to make the revolution happen, then as the quality of our full motion video goes up, then the audience would have gone up and up and up, and the sales would have gone up and up and up. And some of you might say, well, yes, and as a matter of fact, that's exactly what's happened. To which I reply, no, it hasn't happened. As a matter of fact, sales have gone down. What? More lies from the lips of Crawford. But wait. Let's look at some market data here. First, I want to set aside the biggest market data, the video game data. Not because it's, negligible, but because it's too crazy. I mean, look at the history of video game sales. It goes something like this. Atari crash! Commodore 64 crash! Nintendo clunk! Sega block! It's been up and down, a wild roller coaster, and with these crazy oscillations, it's impossible to see slow trends developing. So let's set that data aside and instead look at the computer games data. It's much smaller, but it has the advantage that there are much smaller fluctuations in the data, and it's easier to see what's going on here in the long term. And I'll give you a real simplified treatment of this. Let's go back to the year 1982, the first year that games on home computers really got rolling. And back then, typical hit computer game, not a smash hit, but a hit, might sell 100,000 units. Nowadays, a hit computer game, again, not a smash hit, top 5, top 10, but a hit, might sell 250,000 units. Well, I've just disproven my own case, haven't I? We've gone up from 100,000 units to 250,000 units. That proves it, right? But wait a minute. Back in 1982, the installed base of home computers was something like about 1 million units, which means that the market penetration rate, the percentage of consumers who could buy computer games, who were actually willing to go out and buy a hit, was about 10%. Nowadays, the installed base of home computers is something like 25 million units, which means that the market penetration rate is about 1%. Which means that in the last 12 years, the market penetration rate has gone down from 10% all the way down to 1%. I mean, in any other industry, this would be considered a catastrophe, a disaster. In any other industry, they'd take the marketing and sales people responsible for this, and they'd line them up against the wall and shoot them. But we are proud of ourselves. We give them stock. We pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, we're doing such a great job. And we don't deserve any of the credit whatsoever. All the credit goes to the hardware people who've been driving the price down and the power of the system's way up. They've been moving millions and millions of units. They're the ones who deserve all the credit. We're just going along for the ride. We're piggybacking on their success. We're like a guy who jumps out of an airplane without a parachute and happens to hit a stiff updraft and goes up. And then we flap our arms and say, I'm flying! I'm flying! It's really stupid. So look at the relationship. The quality of the full motion video has gone up and up and up and up, and the market penetration rate has gone down and down and down and down. How can full motion video be the magic ingredient? Well, it isn't. That's not what we're really looking for, and it's a real shame, because there's gobs of people in this industry chasing after full motion video, and millions of dollars being spent on full motion video, and it's not wrong or bad or evil, it's just beside the point. I mean, it's kind of like, building up your retirement fund by looking for quarters under the sofa. It doesn't hurt, but it's not going to get you there. So we need to find the real answer, the true magic ingredient that primetime television has that we lack. And I'll tell you what that is. It's stories. Stories with characters. That's the answer. And you can see it not just in primetime TV, but in everything else. Surf through the channels of television. What are you going to see? People talking with each other, people having stories and comedies and so forth, but it's always characters involved in stories with each other. That's the overwhelming majority of primetime television. And it's not just primetime TV. Look at the movies. It's funny. All the geeks in the world look at Hollywood, and all they can see is Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. When in fact, the overwhelming majority of Hollywood's output are movies like Home Alone and Remains of the Day and Joy Luck Club. Movies without any dinosaurs or explosions or any of that stuff. They're movies about people. That's what's important. Or go into a bookstore. What are the books that people buy for entertainment? Are they geeky books? Are they books with pretty pictures in them? Most of the entertainment books sold are stories about people. Or sports. You think sports isn't about people, is it? I ask you, what was the #1 sports story of the last 12 months? Nancy Harding versus Tony, or Nancy whatever versus Tony or whatever. Kesselring, no, whatever. Kerrigan, yeah. Kesselring. That story had nothing to do with muscle and nerve, everything to do with jealousy and greed. That's human story. What was one of the top sports photos of the last 10 years? How about that photo of the South African runner at the LA Olympics, I think, where she was tripped and hurt her leg, and they took a picture of her as she was lying there looking up in anguish at the other runners going away from her, and you could see she wanted to get up and run, and her leg wouldn't work. And that's what's important. It's how the people feel. The importance of athletic competition is that it lays bare the human character. That's why we hold athletes to such high standards of personal probity. That's what's important here. So, that's what they do. That's what all of these other entertainment industries do. And what do? Look at our output. Bloodless, soulless exercises in resource management and hand-eye coordination and puzzle solving. Our games are appreciated not by mature, healthy adults. They never play our games. Our games are played by adolescent boys and emotionally retarded men. Nerves and teeth all. So, we have really missed the boat here. You can see it just in the budgets. Take the budget for a typical computer game. Divide it up into 3 categories. Spectacle, making it look really great so your eyes bug out and say, wow, that's beautiful. Making it sound really great, okay? The second category would be stories and characters, giving it rich, deep plots with compelling characters. And the third we'll just call everything else, other. Okay, you know what the budgets look like for a typical computer game. Maybe 70% of the budget goes for spectacle. For the programmers who make that really neat 3D engine, the artists who make all those megabytes of graphics, the animators, the sound effects people who make all those nifty keen little sounds, the music people who make those snappy tunes and pounding beats. That's where the money goes. How much money do we spend on story and character? Well, for a typical game, nothing. Oh, we talk about it. I mean, what we do, the total time dedicated to story and character consists right at the beginning of the project, when the producer says, this game is going to be emotionally powerful, it's going to have rich, deep characters. And we go through that little exercise and we say, okay, let's see how many monsters we can blow up now. We don't really spend any money or time on stories and characters. And maybe 30% of our budget goes to other. Compare this with primetime television. Typical primetime television show, maybe 30% of the budget goes for spectacle. Camera operators, microphones, lighting people, all the things necessary to make it look really good. Maybe 50% of the budget goes to story and character. The script writer who writes the story. The actors who make the characters come alive. The director who brings the actors and the script together in front of the cameras. That's about 50% of a budget. And then maybe 20% goes for other things. Compare the two budgets. You can see the difference. The biggest budget item we have is spectacle. The biggest budget item they have is story and character. That's what they understand that we don't. That's the magic ingredient. So, let me check my notes. I think I left something out. No. Gee, I'm right on track. Okay. My memory is better than I thought. Yeah. So, stories with characters are going to be the theme of the revolution. That's going to be the driving force. And I want to emphasize, a lot of people, when they talk about the revolution, they tend to talk a lot about hardware. Boy, this neat new hardware is going to make the revolution happen. In all of human history, there's never a single case of hardware making a revolution happen. All revolutions are driven by human desire. The French Revolution didn't happen, didn't happen because of muskets and pikes. It happened because of peasants who were angry. Actually, more petty bourgeoisie, but that's another issue. Anyway, so the theme of the revolution is going to be stories and characters. That's the real essence of it. So now I can give you the best one-sentence summary of what this revolution is going to be about. It reads something like this. We will utilize the fantastic technologies of the last 10 years and the next 10 years to infuse stories and characters into our products, thereby transforming them from fun games into interactive entertainment. That's what the revolution is going to be all about. So, I'd now like to talk about some of the mechanical considerations here, some of the details associated with actually making this happen. And I got some good news and some bad news for you. The first piece of good news is that we don't have to wait for better hardware. We've already got hardware good enough to do interactive storytelling. A 32-bit processor running at 30 megahertz with 4 megabytes of RAM and a hard drive, Super VGA. That kind of system is completely adequate for doing good interactive storytelling. And I can state that with absolute confidence because I've done it. I have built a working interactive storytelling system. It works. I got it running right now. It really does it. That's the good news. The bad news is it ain't easy. I know, I did it. I have been working on this project for 2.5 years, and I'm not done yet. I'm going to need maybe 6 more months to finish it, which means this is going to be a 3-year project. That might give you an idea how big this is, but even more important, I didn't start from scratch. I started working on this problem 12 years ago. In 1983, I published the very first interactive characters game. It was called Gossip. You gossiped with other people. In 1987, I published the second interactive characters and story game. That was called Trust and Betrayal. You went around betraying people and they wouldn't trust you. Yeah. So I started this process 2.5 years ago with a big head start, and it's still taken me a long time. I can assure you, this is a monster task. We are not going to get anywhere by taking a linear story or, a movie and sticking a few puzzles into it. That doesn't work. It doesn't work to take a graphic adventure and try to slip a few little interactive characters into it. That won't work either. If we want to build interactive storytelling, we have to clear the decks, start from scratch, and build a completely new architecture. That's what I've been doing for these last 2.5 years, and it's hard. So that's the first piece of bad news. The second piece of bad news is we don't have the talent pool we need to do this. To have a revolution, you need soldiers. And our supply of soldiers is kind of weak right now. We got 2 primary pools of talent. The first pool are the computer game designers. And they're good. They understand computers. They understand software. And above all, they understand interactivity. And that's very important. The problem is they don't understand story and character. They don't even understand the importance of story and character, and the best indicator of that is to look at their track record. How many interactive storytelling games have been published? Obviously, people aren't trying very hard here. So they got a fatal flaw here. We got another pool of talent, Hollywood. Scriptwriters, actors, those kind of people. They understand story and character. They really understand it because Hollywood is a jungle, and the law of the jungle is you live or die by the quality of your stories and characters. They understand story and character better than we understand interactivity. The problem is they just don't get interactivity. I've talked to a lot of these people, and they can't get it down their craws. I've seen some of them who've been moving into this industry, And after several years' work, they've made some progress, but they still have a long ways to go. So what we need are people who understand both interactivity and story and character. And the number of people who really grasp both right now is just a pitiful handful. But the worst obstacle we face, the most serious obstruction, is institutional inertia. Remember how I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture that all institutions resist change? Well, the bigger they are, the more they resist change. And boy, this industry resists stories and characters. I can speak from direct experience on this point, too. Because for the last couple of years, I've been taking my interactive storytelling technology around, presenting it to just about all the major computer games companies. And I've gotten pretty much the same reaction from all of them. It sounds sort of like this. Oh, yes, Chris, this interactive storytelling stuff is very impressive. But tell me, what do you have in the way of full motion video? But I really don't want to blame. Oh, wait, one other thing. This isn't just the minions, the low-level jerks who don't know what's going on. Producers, that kind. This is... Sorry. That wasn't in my speech.
That for self-defense?
Yeah. That was an ad-lib, I'm sorry. I gotta watch my mouth. Let's see. No, it's not just producers, it's the executives! Because I've talked to a lot of them, too. And they give me the same story, because they just don't get story and character. Well, I don't want to jump too hard on the publishers, though, because it's not just them. It's the whole industry. Suppose I found a publisher stupid enough to publish my line of interactive storytelling products. Well, what would happen when he goes to a distributor with it? You know what the distributor's going to say. Oh, yes, very impressive, interactive stories, but tell me, what do you have in the way of full motion video? And suppose I find a distributor stupid enough to carry the line. Well, what's going to happen when he goes to a retailer? You know what the retailer will say? Oh, yeah, interactive stories, but look, what do you have in the way of full motion video? And suppose we find a retailer stupid enough to put it on his shelves. What happens when the typical computer games customer walks into his computer store with his pocket protector and his pimples on his face, and he says, "Hey there, what do you have for me today in the way of full motion video, flight simulator, graphic adventure, puzzle, resource, graphic adventure games today?" Yeah. And the retail store clerk says, "Well, we have this interactive storytelling thing here." And the customer says, "Does it have 53 million different colors to take advantage of my new $750 video graphics board? And does it have a soundtrack with 187 different instruments to take advantage of my new $387 music board?" And the retail store clerk says, "Well, no, but it's got love and jealousy and revenge and hatred and passion." And the customer says, "Passion? Passion? I don't want passion. I want pistols. Lots of pistols. Huh?" And he storms out of the store. That's what's going to happen. So it's the whole system, the whole industry. And by the way, you'll notice that I've left the computer games journalists out of this picture. I'm feeling charitable today. So it appeared that the whole system, the entire industry, all the elements are lined up, and if one guy steps out of line, he'll just get stomped down. So, does this mean that the revolution is doomed? Does it mean that our beautiful revolution is doomed to be strangled in its cradle by a crass industry resistant to change? Well, no, friends, because I'm here to tell you that standing on a hill overlooking this valley, surveying the sorry situation, on his white horse sits a mighty hero dressed in white. He surveys the situation and shakes his head. He's going to come riding to the rescue. Who is this great champion, this mighty hero who'll save the revolution? I'll tell you, friends, it's Hollywood! of the revolution. And before that sounds too ridiculous, too absurd, too disgusting, let me explain some reasons here. First, Hollywood understands story and character. That's the one thing they really know. That's their strength. Second, they have the resources. They have the money. They have the institutions for coordinating creative, artistic efforts. That's quite a challenge, as we have been learning. They have the physical plant. And above all, they have the distribution system. So they have the capability to do it. But most important, they have the incentive. They look at interactivity and they know interactivity is the future. They know that if they don't get on the interactivity bandwagon, they will die. And so they really want on. But the problem is, they also know that the companies like Nintendo and Sega and Electronic Arts are the 500-pound gorillas of this industry. They've got their turf solid. And if Hollywood tries to invade the traditional computer games and video games turf, they will get stomped. And they know that. So what they need is virgin turf, territory that has not been staked out yet by Silicon Valley. And that turf is interactive storytelling. So Hollywood has every reason to make this revolution happen, which means that the revolution is going to be driven out of Hollywood, not Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley will play an important role. We'll be the guys under the car getting oil in our faces, while Hollywood is buckling its seatbelt. Because that's the way it's going to work out, because they understand story and characters. So, if you want to make your way through this revolution and keep your head on your shoulders, I suggest you pay heed to some of the advice I've given you today. And I wish you good luck, because you're going to need it. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I want to know if Hollywood is driving this industry, and I have a pile of Hollywood directors looking at my door saying, please, we want this. How do I explain to them that taking all their film cameras out and doing their directing and their acting and all this other film production stuff is probably not going to help me with story and character?
That's going to be something that you probably cannot do alone. That will be the one of the major educational processes that Hollywood will have to go through. That is, this revolution is just as much a revolution for them as it is for us. They have to learn interactivity just as we have to learn stories and characters. And it's going to be painful for them too. I'm sorry, the question there was, how do we convince Hollywood that we don't need all of the video stuff and the cameras and such? Other questions? Yes, Dave.
Well, I'm just wondering, how is it that, even given that we know where the revolution is going, how is it that we can be the people who are at least in the back seat or maybe behind the wheel instead of under the engine?
Yeah, that's a good one. How can we end up being the ones driving the revolution? I don't have a good answer to that. I think it will come from that tiny cadre of people who come to understand both interactivity and storytelling. I suspect that there's a very small group of people can do that right now, and if you can become one of those people, then I suspect that eventually you will be one of the people in the driver's seat. Certainly you will have very little competition. Way in the back there.
What about the rocket scientists? Do you think that's going to be go in the right direction for you?
I have not seen any of their products. How's that for a neat dodge? Noah, is that you?
Yeah, I just want to know how you resolve the paradox there between if Hollywood comes in on the white horse and they, granted, have their understanding of storytelling, it seems to me that they also have a very strong investment in what you have called the dreaded full motion video. as they understand it and not as even an interactive person understands it. And they're going to want to tell their stories with full motion video and cameras and actors. So how's that going to jive?
Yeah, this is basically the same question this gentleman asked. How do we get Hollywood to change? And I'll expand on the previous answer. This is a revolution. Hollywood has to change too. If Hollywood just barges into the interactive revolution and says, we're going to do it the same way we've always done it because we're not letting go of our bag of tricks, well then, they will fail. And in fact, there are lots of them doing it right now. But the advantage is they're building up a track record of experience. And you see, there's a big difference between Hollywood and Silicon Valley. We have a track record for the last 12, 15 years that tells us this is what works. This will succeed, so we are less willing to change. Whereas Hollywood is the guest, the new visitor, the ones coming in saying, wow, look at this new interactive field. I think they will be more open to change than Silicon Valley will be. Yes?
There's a writer named William Goldman who's been writing movies